January 24th budget work session to order. And item number 1 is FY 25-26 budget discussion. I will just add that we're planning to take a break after Andrew speaks. Okay, so we'll turn it over to Chelsea.
Deadlines. So I'm just going to run through this budget calendar really quickly that we established for the current budget cycle. So December 6th was the deadline that city department heads had to give their budget and proposals to the city manager. December 16th through the 20th, we had our department meetings to go through every department budget. Who sat in on those meetings were the department heads, finance director, and myself. We then had follow-up meetings just last week with department heads, so I didn't include that in the calendar. Oh, I did, sorry, it is in the next line item, January 17th. Today, we're at January 24th, the budget work session with the city council and staff. We are going to have another budget work session with city staff and council at our work session on February 10th. That is any last minute follow-up we need to address before we finalize the actual budget itself. February 24th, the council is going to order the notice of the public hearing for that first public hearing required. And then March 15th, that notice will be published and all of the residents are going to get that same paper notification they received last year of the proposed property tax levy from every government entity they pay property taxes to. So then March 24th, we will have our first public hearing. That will happen at our work session. And then when we get into April, we will have our final budget hearing and adoption of the final budget April 14th. The budget is due by April 13th. That leaves us a little bit of wiggle room. So does anybody have any questions on the budget calendar? Okay. I want to start by giving you a little bit of information about our new property valuations for the upcoming year. So our non-TIF valuations increased a little over 2.5% for next year. This is very low for Polk City. Some of this was self-induced and some of it is attributed to slower building in Polk City. I'll spend a little time talking about that. This past year, the city began construction on the water tower project. If you all recalled, we spent a lot of time talking about how we'd finance that water tower project. The council decided that 50% of the water tower project was going to be funded with tax increment financing. So this past year, the city has incurred their largest debt to be repaid back with tax increment financing, probably ever. So we've incurred that debt for that project. We're repaying that back with 50% of TIF. So since now we have that debt being repaid back with TIF, and that is a more significant debt, we can capture additional TIF each year and pay that water tower debt down sooner if we would like to. So some of the non-TIF growth is attributed to this because we captured more TIF than we needed in Urban Renewal Area 2. Okay? While we captured additional increment in Urban Renewal Area 2, our proposal for the budget does not include plans to pay or make additional payments on the water tower project this year. The rationale behind that is we are getting 2.4% interest on the water tower, and we're getting a lot higher interest rate on our cash. So I want to emphasize and I want the council to understand that we are starting to create a cash balance in the TIF fund that we will use to pay off debts that are incurred to be repaid back with TIF money. Other reason valuations were lower this year is because valuations are based on everything that was built before January 1, 2024. So calendar year 2023 was very low for new valuations in Polk City. We issued 25 single-family homes, which is our lowest in the past decade. Single-family home permits, which is the lowest we've had in the last decade. So I expect our valuations to increase some next year. We issued 50 new single-family home permits in 2024. And then next year also will be a statewide assessment. So our valuations are a little bit lower this year for a number of reasons, but it can kind of be attributed to those three things I talked about. TIF, low permit year in 2023, and also it wasn't a statewide assessment year. So I just want to point this out on slide 3 is the slide that it is in your presentation today, but you can see our regular taxable valuations grew by 2.5%. Our debt service taxable valuations grew by about 5%. Okay, so I've kind of laid a little bit of the groundwork. I've explained to you that we're only going to have 2.5% new revenue in property taxes next year. And I will tell you in the past, most of our department budgets have grown by over 2.5%, mostly due to employee costs and property insurance costs. Those are a couple of things that continue to increase at a much faster pace. This year, the department heads were asked to submit a budget which reflected a 5% decrease to their operating lines. So this does not mean that the departments all saw a cut necessarily, but in order to use the new property tax revenue on those items that I've just talked about, employee and insurance, I needed some reductions in some of the other operating lines to make a balanced budget. These reductions allowed small increases to both salary and insurance line items for next year, but most other operating lines were reduced or kept the same. Just a note of significance, this past year, and I'm sure you all noticed this with your homeowner's insurance, we saw a 40% increase on the city's property insurance this past year due to all the statewide natural disasters. For next year, we're expecting a 10 to 15% increase for property insurance, and we've accounted for that in the budget. But it is something that I think we're trying to keep an eye on and make sure that we're budgeting according to property insurance increases over year after year. Okay, the proposed budget. We are recommending keeping the aggregate tax levy rate of $11 per 1,000 assessed the same. I'm not recommending a levy increase for next year. As we get through this presentation, I think the council will understand why I don't think we need to increase the tax levy this year. So my recommendation would be to keep it the same. You'll notice that on slide 4 that our regular general levy is going to be the same as it was last year. Debt service will decrease a small percentage, and then other employee benefits is increasing. Just, it looks like almost 1 cent. So want to spend a little bit of time talking about the major impacts to the financials. There's a couple of things that really impacted this budget, and I'm going to spend some time talking about the newer state legislation, but after this year, I will say that the legislation that's already been passed we'll talk about a little bit less because we've spent a lot of time talking about it last year and this year. I don't know that we need to spend every year rehashing things out. So Just a couple of notes. Year 4 is the final year that we'll receive backfill payment from the state related to House File 2274. I will talk about the highlights of that bill here in a second, but that was legislation that was passed back in 2012 that gave a rollback to commercial, industrial, and multifamily property. The state had been backfilling those payments to local governments, and back in 21, they established a phase out, depending on how quickly your city valuations were increasing. We were on the 4-year plan. So this is the last year we will collect any of that backfill money from the state of Iowa for that loss. Again, I've already mentioned this, 2023 calendar year was a low construction year for Polk City. I want to talk a little bit about House File 2552, which is the business tax credit or the business tax reduction on the first $150,000 of value. And then I want to spend just a little time talking about House File 718 and Senate File 2442. Okay, House File 2274, just a reminder, this was that property tax reform bill that was passed back in 2012. It rolled taxes back on commercial and industrial property, so business owners didn't pay 100% taxes. They instead paid 90% of the assessed value. This also included a provision for multifamily, and that multifamily used to be taxed at 100%, and now it matches the residential rollback. The current rollback is $46.34. That is going up a little bit next year to 47 and change. So we'll spend a little time talking about that number. So again, the dollars we get from the state it was appropriated money known as the backfill to reimburse local governments on the loss on commercial and industrial until 2026 for Polk City, or 2028, depending on the growth in the city. So our phase out for this was a 4-year period. So it would have began 4 years ago from July 1st. Year 4, our total estimated loss in revenue just from this change is about $40,000 plus or minus. Okay, House File 2552 was approved back in 2022. This was that business tax credit. So prior to this legislation, business owners had the ability to apply for a business tax credit through the state, and it gave you a credit in that for the first $150,000 of value, you paid the residential tax rate. The legislature just applied it to everybody. So you no longer have to apply for it. Everybody just gets it now. So that is what this legislation, it's more automatic than needing to be applied for, but it has significantly impacted the city's budget. So it is state appropriated money. They have appropriated to backfill or reimburse local governments on this loss. However, the Department of Revenue has said that the appropriation fund is already negative. So for the purpose of the fiscal year 26 budget, we are not counting on getting any of this backfill money. I think that's the best way to budget.
So Chelsea, have we then, so in 25, historically, we've got the backfill for this?
We have, but this would have only been, I think, for 1 year. I know I said that it was approved in 2022. I don't think this one took effect immediately, if I recall. So yes, we have previously.
Okay. But in 26, we don't anticipate that.
We are not planning on it, and we'll call it gravy if we receive it. So the estimated impact of this one is about $35,000 to the city's general fund. House File 718, I think this is the really tough one that's been difficult to maneuver. So this was approved back in 2023, and it created a new combined general fund levy. It's called the CGFL, and for the life of me, I can't get that acronym correct anytime. And it replaces the regular general fund levy that used to be known as the 810 levy. It also required cities to utilize the CGFL for fiscal years 25 through 28, and it placed a firm maximum on the CGFL at 810 in fiscal year 29. So I think you could start out at $8.27, depending on your valuation growth. There is a trigger in this legislation where if your valuations increase by a certain amount, your CGFL is automatically reduced, and the local government has no say over that. It also eliminated a number of levies previously available to local governments. The emergency levy is one that comes to my mind. We have used the emergency levy previously. That's a levy that's no longer available to local governments in Iowa. So, like I said, it kind of created this mechanism or trigger to automatically reduce or decrease depending on certain levels of growth. While I think it's important that you all understand what those thresholds are, there was new legislation passed last year that changed the threshold, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about the ones on this slide. And I will talk about the new ones on the next slide for Senate File 2442. House File 718 also expanded the homestead tax credit and then the military service exemption tax credit. And I would say that those two tax credits have significantly impacted local government budgets. It also placed restrictions on when city governments can put forward a referendum to voters for certain types of general obligation bonds. We used to be able to hold special elections if we wanted the taxpayers to vote on the sale of general obligation bonds. Now we just have to have those with regular elections, which take place in November. It also, one positive thing is it did increase our general corporate purpose bonding thresholds. So the city used to be able to borrow up to $700,000 in general corporate purpose bonds without voter approval. You can now borrow over $900,000 without voter approval. And then it also implemented a new budget adoption and filing process. Okay, so this one is the newest legislation that's impacted local governments. It's Senate File 2442, and it changed those growth limitations, I think in a very negative way, that had kind of begun with House File 718. So if your annual non-TIF taxable value growth is under 2.75%, there's no reduction to the CGFL. So I kind of look at that as you're in a really sweet spot. If you're below 2.75%, although you're not getting a lot of revenue, there's no mechanism to drive down your CGFL. It changed the other thresholds though, so now if you're in the 2.75% to 3.99%, you're reduced by 1% automatically. If you're in the 4 to 5.99%, you're reduced by 2%. 6% or higher, you're reduced by 3%. So where I think this is really challenging for, staff members preparing a budget is if you're at 2.75%, you're reduced down to 1.75%. You're much better off to be at 2.74 than 2.75. So that is another reason why we kind of have been talking about utilizing TIF more and more, is to make sure our valuations aren't growing excessively. Do you all have any questions about that? Okay, let's move on then. We do this every year. We show this to the council and to the public as part of our budget presentation. It's where do your taxes go if you are a resident of Polk City. So just to note that this shows residents their consolidated property tax rate in Polk City, or the breakdown, and it is just for the North Polk School District. As we continue to grow into the Ankeny School District, we are probably going to have to come up with a second image. Just kind of want to make sure that I spent a little bit of time talking about this, because I think that over the years we've done this and you all have found a ton of value in it and sharing it with the residents, and I know the residents have provided some feedback as well. So Andrew is going to get up and talk here in a second. You won't have to listen to me talk for the whole 3 hours, I promise. But he's going to talk about valuations, property tax levy, revenue and expenditures for the proposed budget. Last thing is I wanted to show this to you. Obviously, we're just starting the fiscal year 2026 property tax rate. I think this is something that we talk about quite a bit, is what the consolidated rate is. I'm not going to have 26 available to you until all the other governments certify their budgets. But 2024, the consolidated tax levy rate was $40.18. That has decreased a little. Last year it was $39.99. You can kind of take a look. It does look like the county hospital reduced theirs a little bit. Ag Extension reduced theirs a little bit. County assessor went up, and the community college just went a little bit up. So, questions? Okay, I'm gonna let Andrew take over.
So you've got a graph in front of you here that Chelsea's already kind of covered, that your non-TIF values have gone down over the years in terms of growth. We're looking at about 2.5%, and that kind of really affects the core services we're able to offer, whether that's, increasing them or just maintaining them. We were able to manipulate that to get below the 2.75% to avoid that 2% penalty at the 5% mark. And then moving on to the next slide, you've got the property tax levy compared to the rest of the Des Moines Metro. We're sitting just below in my opinion, but way below the average there, $1.29 below the average, 9th out of the 20 that we pulled for $11 per thousand assessed. 25 cents away from being 4th. If you want to consider that, I don't know. And then to the next slide, these are comparing cities in Iowa with 4,000 to 8,000 residents. You can see the average there is a lot higher, and I think, cities our size don't benefit from the economies of scale that Ankeny does or Des Moines. So I think this is a fairer comparison in some ways. So I think we're 8th out of the 55 cities between these numbers, so I think that's really something to be proud of. And then on the next slide, you've got the property tax comparison. So Polk City is on the left. You can see that 90% of our property tax breakdown is residential, and then only 9% is commercial versus the Iowa average, which is a lot more commercial and industrial, taking the tax burden off the residents so much. So I think that's an area that we could look into for sure. Oh, sorry, yep.
So this pie chart that you're showing us, again, sure.
Yep.
The one on the left that's showing us 19.
Mhm.
That's us as a.
Yep,
Okay. One on the right is.
that is FY24. That's the most update they had on their website. So there is a discrepancy there for sure, but
And that's the average for cities in Iowa.
yes,
Okay.
yep. Sure, yeah.
Regardless
Yeah.
of what it is, they're significantly different.
Yeah, that's the point. So one of the things I'm gonna try to do, just combat this year is when I have. Why is our taxes so high? That was a common theme for me in 24, 25. I'm gonna do a better job. Figuring that provide
For sure.
true statistics. Having graphs available.
Yeah, I do like this one, and I like the one.
Yeah, I think that is one just to add on that, man, is that tells a compelling story, right? Feels like read the tea leaves. last, we've got this a line chart, I think that's easier.
Okay,
The one before it was as well.
okay.
You know, it's a black bar. Yeah, looking at the line drafts. Yes, it's a great set to have.
Okay, sure.
It is a good picture. It's half roughly of the equation because our home values here are different than a lot of these communities. Smaller community or communities that are our size and different parts, but
Yeah.
they're not 450, 500 like we are.
But I agree, it's only a part of the story. We have a lot of parts to our story, so I think none of these graphs alone tells anything. I mean, it's a piece of it, right? So, yeah, I think, again, more information like this is great,
Sure.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it's a piece.
Moving on to the next slide, you've got the annual household impact on a $400,000 home. Really, we're just comparing our core services that we offer, so the water, sewer, storm, garbage, and property taxes over the last 4 years. So this year, we're looking at a 4% increase, but it is still below what it would have costed on that $400,000 house in FY '24 and '23. Now, the residents won't see that as their house prices increase, but just to give you an idea. And that's mainly due to the rise in water and sewer. Then the next slide is the general fund cost per capita. We're below the average, so that is what we spend on police, fire, library, parks, building. So we're giving our core services for better value, maybe you could say. Yeah. Next slide. These are our proposed operating revenues for FY '26. So you just kind of see where the money's coming in. So a lot of it's coming in from your charges for sewer services, which is your water, sewer, storm. Yep.
Sorry. Cost per capita,
Cost-
so that's the previous slide
Yep.
divided by our population.
Um,
So the property tax rate, the cost of water, sewer, storm.
No, so that's everything in your general fund. So there's a bit more in your general fund. So that's your police, your fire, your parks, your library.
It would not include water.
No, that is enterprise, yep.
Is anything that's coming out of our general fund? Designated revenue streams for? Upwards that we use. For service.
Yeah.
Road use tax.
This is mainly your property taxes go to your general fund. I can skip ahead if you want to the general fund slide. I think it's one, two. So on the general fund, you're getting in, your property taxes mainly cover that. Transfers in, so that's your lost revenue. We put a portion of that for property tax relief. And then your charges for services, so that's your fire department, you know, if they go to a medical emergency, and your building permits. So that's all the money that comes into your general fund, and then they pay for services like your parks, your library, fire, police, general government, so the admin of this building. If I skip back to, we're all on the same one, we're back at operating revenues, if we're all there. So this is your operating revenue, so all your revenues are set from your capital projects essentially. So the majority come in from charges for services, then property taxes, intergovernmental, so that's road use tax, that's any grants that we're receiving, TIF revenues, other city taxes, so that's loss, that's utility franchise. I think there's one more. Hotel, motel. For operating revenues, I have, I can probably pull that up on my laptop, but I have 25 versus 26 in this. So then you've got your operating expenses. Very similar stuff. Your enterprise funds make up the majority of it, your public safety, debt service, so that's, you know, all of our capital projects, the payments on those, your parks, your community development, which is all your TIF rebates, public works, which is mainly roads. And then this is revenue sources, but including capital project funding, so that's your other funding sources, like loans essentially. And then your budget by function, which kind of shows you the budget as a whole, so everything's included in this one, so you can see the majority of our expenses are going to be capital projects, 48%. And then your general fund, this is back to the revenue of the general fund, which we've covered, I think, now. And then the budget brief is when we can get into the budget. So that's your other document that got sent out. Zoom. So then this is your budget, so you're comparing FY25 to FY26. And then it kind of shows you the change year over year, dollar value and percentage. So it kind of highlights any major changes. If you want to ask any questions on why we've had big changes in categories, feel free. If anyone has any questions on that?
So, let me understand again, from a revenue perspective, I know we talked, I understand that water and trash is a revenue. Those are the terms for fees and services.
Storm and
Water, trash.
sewer, there's the four, yeah.
Those funds, or those, that revenue pretty much comes in and goes straight back out.
It's just the way they do it. It's a business, it's an enterprise sort of thing. And those funds are only to be used for those sort of expenses. So yeah, comparing the year over year budget, you know, you're seeing certain increases. Let's say, for example, police has risen 8%, and that's mainly due to we're adding an additional officer. Where the union police officers are getting about an 8% raise. And then you've got other things down here. City attorneys up, excuse me, 23%, and that's because the city attorney rates went up 33%. So it's just an easier way of seeing any of the big differences. Going to the next. Yep. Civil defense is mainly your sirens. So we're going to install a siren, or possibly install a siren on Antler Ridge, I believe. So that's the reason that's gone up so much. It's only gone up 19,000, but it's such a small account. It's, you know, it looks a bit bigger than it is. Then moving on to your revenues, you can kind of see there your year over year again. Our TIF revenues, like we've mentioned, have gone up to avoid that penalty. And then your other city taxes has gone up 13%, and that's because we did the special census. So that's really good. Intergovernmental, we're getting a couple more grants than we previously got. That also includes road use that was affected by your special census. Charges for services is going up. That is not entirely down to increases in fees. We are going to get reimbursed by CIWW for running the water treatment plant for $200,000, so it's not as big as an increase as it seems there. And then on your next slide, you can kind of see there each of the functions in the government and what funds they hit. So, you know, police hits general, then you've got roads hits special revenues fund, and that kind of tells you what's hitting which fund. Your knowledge, and then on the last, second to last slide, you've got a cash cash flow. That's your estimated fund balance as of July 1st, 2025, your revenues for each fund, your expenditures, and your estimated funds at the end of FY26. And then on that second to last column is your increase and decrease on each fund. We have a surplus in our general fund, but overall I am proposing a budget with a deficit of 1.9 million, and that's mainly due to capital projects that started this year. We received funding either this year or last year for those projects, and then they're just bleeding into FY26. So I think we received 2023 had some funding for the trails that aren't going to be constructed till next year. So that's really then why there's such a big deficit. There is a deficit in the water fund. We use PFM's numbers for that, and that's what they're predicting. Just to avoid there's going to be a rate increase, but to avoid a big spike in rates, essentially, they kind of do it over time. So we're expecting a deficit in the water fund for, I think, until FY30. I'm not sure if that's going to be correct or not, hopefully not. But that's what they're predicting right now. Let's see if I've missed anything out for you. And then there's a deficit in the LMI fund, and that's just because we're making a transfer of $1 million to fund the water tower. And then on your last slide is transfers. This is just a list of transfers in and out throughout the next year. You can see, what lost funds, police department, fire department equipment. It funds the 3rd Street corridor, street projects, property tax relief. You've got TIF that goes towards paying down debt. It goes towards the chamber, the admin, the trail. So that kind of just shows you where the money's going there. And then if you don't have any more questions, we're going to break for 5 minutes.
Do you want to wait a little bit? We're getting through this quickly.
I can stand here.
You want to wait a minute there? Is that okay? It's only 2:35.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
We were over $3 million. Maybe 5 years ago. Yeah, but for a few years, yes. Yep. And a lot of it was attributed to the TCI project.
Operationally, it's the same for us. We will have a little bit more administrative work now to get bills to them, collect the bills, get them ready, prepared, to prove what we've spent, that type of thing, so we can send our bill to them.
Okay, anything else? We're gonna move on to capital projects. If you guys don't have any questions, we can always come back to anything else you want to talk about. So, okay, I want to spend a good amount of time talking about capital projects. I've divided this into 2 different categories. The first category is things that I feel like I've gotten pretty clear guidance from the council on. It's either in the CIP, it's been brought up at a recent session, and then the next category are things that we're probably going to have to talk through a little bit. So let's spend a little time talking about what's in the budget next year. 3rd Street corridor study. This was the #1 prioritized project in the CIP when we did our CIP planning. And this is to study the limits of 3rd Street from Bridge Road to East North Side Drive. Estimated lump sum is $24,000. We will fund this study with local option sales tax. And the project timeline, Snyder and Associates has proposed that we start in May. They will not bill us until after July, but they want to capture school traffic patterns. I think that's probably a good rationale too. Does anybody have questions about this project? Okay, let's move on to the Central Iowa Waterworks purchase assignment. This was also in the CIP. This was prioritized by the council, but it's also kind of a requirement per our 28E agreement with Central Iowa Waterworks. We are going to have a purchase assignment estimated just shy of 1.7 million. This purchase assignment gets us that additional capacity though, so we're not paying those premium costs. Again, this was included in the agreement. The way we are planning to finance this capital project is PFM has recommended that we utilize this SRF loan to fund the project. So we've rounded to $2 million to borrow for this purchase assignment. Questions?
And the balance of that,
For budgeting purposes, we plug 2 million in, but as we get closer to what the actual cost of that purchase assignment is, we will lower what we're borrowing. We won't borrow additional money, but we use round numbers in budgeting typically, especially when we're borrowing money, and then if it comes in lower, we don't have to do an amendment. Yeah, good question.
If I'm remembering correctly, don't we have the potential here to sell some water? Allotted amount?
I remember that being a discussion. I don't know that that's something that made it in the agreement. I would have to get back to you on that. It was talked about, yes. I'll get back to you on that. I'll follow up on that. Okay, Big Creek Schoolhouse improvements. Let's spend just a little time talking about this. We had a work session on this topic at the last meeting, and the council asked us to prioritize putting this into next year's budget. So the estimates I gave you was $78,000. We've rounded up to $100,000 that we've budgeted for exterior improvements. We would propose using tax increment financing to fund this project. Our rationale behind that is that we have the downtown support incentive program. That program is funded through TIF, and it is covering equivalent projects in the downtown area. So exterior improvements could be constructed using TIF. We will need to do a couple of things. We will need to amend the city's urban renewal plan. We have to do that anytime we have a new project in our urban renewal area. We're going to talk about some other amendments that we might need to make to that plan though as well in this presentation. We also should amend our CIP if this is a priority of the council. We should amend that into the CIP. So we plugged $100,000 into the budget. I think this number could be reduced once the council prioritizes exterior improvements, but not knowing what those priorities are in the next month will make it challenging for us to put an exact dollar amount in the budget. I'm completely comfortable leaving what we have in there for now. It does not include a structural analysis. I know we talked about that at the last work session. Some of you said it would be great if you would have that before our budget work session. I don't have that. I have engaged 2 separate firms to get me a cost on a structural analysis. My thought is it's going to cost somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000 to do a structural analysis. That analysis probably should be done this current fiscal year. Is that something that you would all agree with? Can you get behind our what we're proposing for this project? Okay. I have not yet, but I will. Yep, I had 4 things to do, so we're working on it. Yep. Okay. Annual street repair project. This is something we do annually. We have budgeted $250,000 in street repairs for fiscal year '25. The CIP showed that we were going to do a $600,000 repair, and we were going to use some road use fund balance to pay for the project. So we do have a road use tax fund cash balance of about $600,000. If the council wanted to spend $350,000 of that cash balance on doing a larger scale street repair project, we could do that. Where I've paused a little bit on why we didn't put this in the budget is I kind of want to see what happens with property tax reform before the city spends cash that we have available. I wanted to spend just a little time talking about this today. I know Mike has been really excited to do a large street repair project because the annual 200 to 300,000, it's just kind of getting us by, and we really do need to get ahead of our list of repairs that need to happen. So I would like to propose we wait to see if there's any new property tax reform. This is something we could always amend in the future if it's something that the council wants to prioritize, but this is what I have in the budget right now.
I think it makes sense if we have concerns about potential changes. A little bit, but I'd be very open to amendment if we are able to.
Okay,
600,000 is for multiple projects.
it's one project, but we would do way more street repairs than we can typically do annually.
So it's the same types of street repairs we can do like year over year. Projects, not
Yes.
a large project.
I'm on board too. I would like to see how far behind we're getting with the smaller ones. I don't know. It may not be fair to ask what 15 or 4 like for the smaller stuff, but bigger projects, like, and I know we've got a decent, it depends on wear and tear, a lot of factors, but some sort of, like, we're staring on the barrel of 3 different roads and $5 million worth of road work that's gonna come to a head over a certain, I'm not explaining this very well, but you're nodding, so.
No, I know. So we have our street repair project laid out. That's pretty simple. Those are the small repairs that you're talking about there. So we have that pretty much right now, and we can give you that number. Some of the streets that aren't in it are like Broadway Street. That's a big 2-mile road, 1.5-mile road through town. We would have to add those in. Decide how long it would be to touch that road bed. But anyway, some of that information we have, and we can just get it to you.
The roads that are not curb and gutter, just come from the table on whatever. If anything.
Mostly, yes, because we did that larger project, 4 years ago or so, that took care of a lot of those asphalted streets is what we're really talking about.
Well, no, I'm talking about some of these over here.
Yes, we did that. On the hill, the Phillips area.
Yep.
We did those areas, yes.
Yeah, there's a church that's pretty good now. Wood, running for a while. Then, I think, second, first, so, if that's.
Talking curb and gutter sections, total reconstruction. When we did the resurfacing, we kind of put a pause on that type of reconstruction because it is so expensive to do. So at that point, we were just going to move forward with re-asphalting when needed, I guess.
So the city used to do major road reconstruction projects like you did on Grimes Street, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Washington Booth, yeah.
So that's where we came in, sorry, this kind of piqued my interest. Harder is be well taken care of. So when you say reconstruction of old asphalt streets that don't.
That's what I'm understanding, that I think Rob is saying is, are we going to continue to do that? We haven't done it for a number of years.
Yeah,
That's the applicant.
I'm not advocating that we should do it necessarily. Okay. This is what it would take type of thing. You don't have too many ones. Right here,
Quite a few of them.
Stitch, Sills, okay.
But
Roosevelt.
But I do think to Mike's point, I do remember that when we did the asphalting, we said we're gonna, that's the plan for the time being. So I think, big picture, if we can't plan for a big project or if it doesn't work next year, I do think it is helpful to know if we're creating a snowball. If maybe we can't do 600,000, but maybe annually we can get up into, you know, by 50,000 every year. And if something, the big project, maybe the year before, after, do more later years to get. I think curb and gutter on the other ones is thing, but yeah, see what the priorities are. A big project like this, how to maybe up it.
Now, when you say curb and gutter, do you also mean sidewalk?
Why those projects tend to get a bigger price tag, because we go in and we assess the sewer, see what it's like, the water main, fire hydrants, sidewalks, all that gets looked at, and it usually gets updated when we do the curb and gutter.
Real back the onion questions later. That's always surprising. It's like, I know what I'm asking is not like, totally get it. So maybe I'm coming at this from a wrong premise, but I'm concerned that over enough time, push, you're gonna at our asphalt roads and therefore progress a little bit differently than. I can see I keep going out of factory. I'm gonna have anything probably inside of that other than potentially. Do it makes more sense for all the reasons you just talked about, and do a decent chunk. If it's impactful, it's expensive, it's all of those things. But don't spend a ton of time on it, just some. I had to do this over 30 years.
No, you're good. We have time.
So again, I guess what I want to understand too is I understand our strategy on the asphalt roads. So on our just normal maintenance on our road, I can understand this. If we're gonna throw an additional 350, how far does that get us? How far are we currently behind? Put more money. I agree with Rob's assessment.
Okay, that sounds good. We can get you a list. Anything else on this one? Okay. Okay, so we're gonna call these other capital projects. These are all things that are in the budget next year. I haven't gotten a ton of feedback from the council on these few things. They'd be very easy to make a change though. So let's spend some time talking about these items, which I could use some direction on. Okay, let's talk about the regional park project, and let's talk about authority for borrowing money. If you're going to borrow money and repay back that loan with property taxes, there are two authorities that you use in Iowa. There is essential corporate purpose and there is general corporate purpose. So the difference between the two are in the names. Essential are things like roads, utilities like water, sewer, sidewalks and trails can fall under essential purpose, especially if they are part of a street project. General corporate purpose is everything else. So this includes parks, building construction. If you wanted to build a new library, it would fall under this category. So I think we've spent some time in past years talking about this. Do you all understand the difference between the two? So the council has the ability to issue debt under the essential corporate purpose law. It is always subject to a reverse referendum. So if you issue debt and your citizens come in with a petition that they don't want you to issue the debt, it could go on the ballot. General corporate purpose, you're limited on how much you can borrow up to. There is a limit you can borrow up to for this amount. Anything over that limit, you have to have voter approval for. So the park project was under general corporate purpose. And after the November election, I spent some time talking with our bond counsel about, is there anything we could do on this project which would fall under the essential corporate purpose? In reviewing the project and just the scope of the project, Northeast 7th Street construction would fall under essential corporate purpose. Northeast 7th Street is a responsibility of the cities to construct under the agreement we made with Knapp Properties. So the city is responsible for constructing the road through the park to Knapp subdivision. So if you go up to the park and you see the little stub up there that kind of takes you to the water tower, that's Knapp's responsibility that they've constructed there. The city needs to construct the road all the way to the park boundary limit. Okay, so you all understand that. Let's go to the next slide.
So just to make sure I'm clear.
Yes?
Northeast 7 would be that street that runs up on the north side all the way up to the east facility.
Yes.
Okay, the one that's essentially west side of the future park.
Yes.
Just part of it.
Yep, just through the park.
Yeah, so just,
But that's most of it,
Just
between
as-
these, the lake and Madison.
right, just all this. Yes. And the map does this. Who does from north side? No, who does from north side up to Madison?
Yes, that is part of their subdivision.
Okay.
Knapp is also responsible for extending East Madison Drive.
They're already doing both of those, right?
They do not have construction drawing approval yet. So they could grade, they are doing some grading, but no road construction yet. Okay, next slide, okay. So I want to spend some time just chatting this through. So I already mentioned this, the city council has the authority to borrow up to a certain amount for general corporate purpose. That dollar amount used to be $700,000 before House File 718 was enacted. It increased your general corporate purpose limitation to $910,000. That dollar amount goes up every January 1st, so that 910 is last year's number. I am not sure what the new number is, but it's like a 2 or a 3% increase, so I think you can get the picture there. So we've included $2 million in bond proceeds into the budget for the construction of Northeast 7th Street. Confluence estimate for Northeast 7th Street is $2.3 million to construct the street, and that includes engineering. I have always questioned their cost estimates. They just seemed high. And estimates are estimates. it really doesn't matter until you get actual bids for a project. So I want to be very clear on that. I did ask Snyder to prepare a cost estimate for Northeast 7th. Their estimate is shy of 1.6 million for the road, okay? So I think there's a pretty large discrepancy there, but what I'm trying to get at is if you all want to prioritize the road being constructed, I think borrowing $2 million for the project would get the project done. Okay, so
Is there any chance we could do a development agreement with, to build the road at the same time that they build their section of the road?
I don't believe you could borrow money to team with a developer because you're not bidding the project out. So I think it would be a little bit easier to do if you were paying cash. Bidding laws make it challenging because technically if you're partnering with a developer, you're taking out the competitive bid component.
But if there's enough cost savings, if we had allocated $1 million for the reserve fund and the bond issue passed, aren't there $1 million towards this?
No, because we're still doing mass grading.
All of that was towards that.
Yes, and the mass grading contract was 1.2. So just so you all know, the council spent $2 million of cash on the park over the last 5 years. My suggestion to you is I don't think the council should use all of the cash available on the park. You're going to have to start borrowing at some point. It is just a suggestion, but you do want to have some cash reserves for other things that come up in the city. I think you all kind of understand that. So,
We do, and our reserves were higher than a lot of places to begin with.
correct.
I'm not saying that to dispute your larger point, that, you know, have to acknowledge the money and the work that has been done here, even though it doesn't have use, it's still, and that's, I guess I don't know that, is there anything in any of this like talking about our overall reserve?
The budget brief, you've got your fund balances on the cash flow.
What's the?
The second to last on the budget brief. So we're estimating ending the year with total fund balances of 10.5 million, but a lot of those are locked up with sewer, water. How much? For
How about general
general
fund?
fund?
Yeah.
2.6 million.
That's 50% of your expenses for a year. That's a really good target. I would say that if you go much lower than 50%, it impacts the interest rate you get on the sale of your bonds. So I would suggest maybe not spending cash reserves for a little while. I could see over the next couple of years, maybe those cash reserves do increase a little bit. We could rediscuss, but
Decide to make things happen different ways.
okay, so just a thought, and I've spent some time talking to, like I said, our bond counsel. We've had a conversation with PFM, had a conversation with engineering firms as well. If the funds are borrowed in 2026, we can strategize our schedule so that we don't have any payments until fiscal year 27. So there would be no levy impact to the budget in 26 if you wanted to borrow funds to construct the road. We also feel pretty comfortable about using some TIF money on the project. I can't give you a good idea of how much, but we could certainly look into issuing debt and repaying that debt back with TIF instead of property tax, the debt service levy. But absolute worst case scenario, and this is just a really quick analysis, this is assuming like a 5% interest rate on the sale of our bonds if we borrowed for 20 years, is that what we agreed on? That road would increase the levy by 36 cents per 100,000. That's based on fiscal year 2026 valuations. Like I said, you wouldn't have a payment till 2027, so I feel comfortable that's worst case scenario, knowing you have a couple of other things going in your favor. The other thing is, if we're going to construct the road, highly suggest we construct phase 3 of the trail as the same contract. That would save us a little bit of money on maybe mobilization cost. But that phase 3 of the trail is fully funded. We've received grant funding for it. Estimated cost was $320. We could save about $16,000 just on the estimate with doing it with the road. The estimated cost doing it without the road was $320,000. If we do it as part of the roadway project, the estimate's $304,000 for the trail.
Cost savings there. Is there anything else driving the
No, there's nothing driving it, but it is the city's responsibility, and the cost will continue to go up year after year. Yes, I do believe there is a date, and I'll have to take a look at that.
What was your question again? Do we have an agreement, do we have anything in our agreement with the act about when we have to have that road constructed by? Just piggybacking off of your, okay.
Yep, I will, I'll get back to you on that. So the only other thing I wanted to talk about is, I think that the council could borrow the money for the road. You could also borrow the additional $900,000 and do a portion of the park. This is a political decision, so this is your decision to make. My hesitation on borrowing the $900,000 would just be if you're planning to put it back on the ballot for transparency purposes, I think it might be best to hold off on borrowing that additional amount unless you're not going to put it back on the ballot in the near future.
What is that $900,000 going to get us? What can we do with that?
It could be some soccer fields, but highly doubt you'd have any parking.
That's just it.
Wasn't the quadrant where the soccer fields are, parking lot, the road, water tower,
Yes,
concession stand?
I don't think the concession stand was included in that 1.3 million. Mm-mm.
Out of there that would save.
So I apologize, everyone, it's just me, kind of got lost, so where are the funds coming from to pay for the street?
I would propose that we try to use TIF. But worst case scenario, you would use property taxes and the debt service levy, which would increase your debt service levy to 36 cents.
For that, but then you're also proposing borrowing more money for the park.
That is up for discussion right now if the council wants to also borrow up to the $900,000 limit for the park. And that would,
Conversations about borrowing money essentially.
yes, yes. So we've put the borrowing for the road in next year's budget. Unless you tell me to change it, that is what's in the budget, in the proposed budget today.
Yeah, I think I'm comfortable with moving forward with the road and then also phase 3 of the trail. That's the, I think those first two pieces.
Everybody think about the road.
Well, full.
Yep,
So that road,
Essentially from the municipal forward.
Yes. Sidewalk on the east side only, because the west side is the school property, and they would be responsible for the sidewalk when their portion of that lot is developed.
So I don't know if chunking this up compromises our cost on this, but looking at this map, you don't need, if the first thing that we're gonna do here for 2 or 3, couple, probably just practice soccer fields, what we would have with the full length of the road. So is there a way to do a lesser amount and therefore being able to, or second or third field, or whatever that looks like? So incorporating feedback from, is a part of this discussion. Also will accept the premise that we're probably not going to get anything 5 years without borrowing money. But the most near-term decision that I think we need to make right after the meeting, which is allocate some of our otherwise allocated money towards this. That ends up getting rolled into the debt and project back in, I don't know, but what I'm reading here, we have no plans to do anything without borrowing money, which would, right?
We would propose that we bid the road out this fall, and it could start this fall into the spring of '26 would be the construction season. Mm-hmm.
So that, I mean, yes, that's more specifically the same. So, again, I want, to me, I think the best approach is allocating money towards larger discussions of how much do we borrow and what do we. So, I go into what that may impact other CIP projects, but if before, we don't.
So that's separate from the $900,000 that the council has the option to borrow in addition, right?
Correct.
That's money coming out for other CIP projects. So if the council wanted to set the course for borrowing $900 and some thousand, do they have to do it, or do they just have to have the approval to do it?
The council can approve general corporate purpose up to that amount for the park, and it would include all the amenities associated with the park.
They wouldn't have to spend it, though, just would have to have the approval there to do it if the council wanted to do it.
If you borrow money, you should have a plan to spend it. That can be done at the council level, though. You don't need approval from anybody else. Does that answer your question?
Are you saying to ask for, to approve borrowing now and wait till?
Yeah, I just wanted, yeah, absolutely, it's exactly what.
Okay.
Let's have the table set to have that flexibility.
Okay,
And then if we don't use it, we don't have to, if we don't have a desire to do it, then we don't
okay,
borrow it.
okay.
So that would increase the levy rate.
Yes. So I would need to refigure that 36 cents increase, because that borrowing that 900,000 is not in the budget. I know this was brought up at our committee meeting, and it's really early. We've only met 1 of 6 times. Are you all thinking that we would have this on a future ballot again for reconsideration? Okay.
On their desire to do that,
it's this, whether it's November 25 or November 26, or to do it at part of the equation. Open to the idea,
Okay,
just message that I got, the direction where I was going with my. Go for a lesser dollar amount and don't want anything to use. 5 to 10 years, but that's. So, to me, everything's on the table. From half to parking lot next to a practice only. And I know that. For Rocktown or road aren't. Don't spend options, but to get, to fix the. Struggle with spending, whether it's road that still doesn't get us anything.
Road is borrowed under a different aspect of it than,
It doesn't affect the levy because if we use TIF.
What's real quick, so this 36 cents, that's not for the road.
That's if you borrowed for the road, not using TIF.
so that's worse, we're teeing it up like that's worst case scenario, but we think that we could use some TIF to bring that impact down.
But worst case, that's 36 cents per thousand.
That's what I.
no, that's the full road.
That's a full road.
It's the full road, and again, to Chelsea's point earlier, the reason I would be in favor of is only getting more expensive, so that money for the full road is
Yes,
that's a different purpose that we would borrow under than other amenities. Just bond vote on the other amenities if they don't agree. Money for the road could be paid by TIF and could potentially have impact on our ultimate levy.
correct, but
Purpose argument holds no water. I mean, we got people weigh in on if funding mechanism changes in the margins, but I don't think people are gonna listen to our, well, we actually borrowed that under a different pool, $2 million than the bond vote that we voted no on was for. I do understand that's part of it. My push here is how can we spend as little as possible to get something? Only doing that with like a 5 to 10 year horizon of usage on that path to park or to the practice.
But from what I'm understanding though, constructing the road could be paid by TIF, which could potentially have no impact on the levy rate. And I think what people had the biggest concern with in the park is the impact to taxes. So that's where I'm good with the road, because I think the road is needed, it's gonna get more expensive, it moves.
Yeah, I
Okay,
guess.
I'm not the only one, I'll shut up here, but
No,
that's how
I
I'm
was gonna
looking
say,
at it.
Mandy, I agree with you. My only hesitation is if we can't use TIF to pay for the road, you're 36 cents there. Which I'm not saying is a bad idea. Rough math, you're another 18 cents on top of that, right? So you're 54 cents and 1,000 that people are gonna see, roughly 450. Average home price, what's that, $300 more a year? Really not gonna have much potential. So trying to understand.
Jason has something to clarify.
Rob, you made a point earlier about having 2 access points. So this is how I'm understanding it with the pause that we're at right now. The drive that would get you to the north side of the park does not exist. So this extension would be the one-way into the park,
Okay, we're coming from the south.
from the west.
Yeah, we're,
Southwest corner of the property.
so what we're looking at
So I-
is, you know, how the road goes all the way up.
Correct, yes.
We're talking about, do we need to go make that from here to this one?
Okay.
We only make Northeast Seventh go halfway up to and go into the park, and then it stops.
If you put it right, are you talking about getting to Northeast Seventh from East Vista Lake or from Madison?
Oh, I'm just talking to get into the park, period.
Well,
That would
okay,
be the
so-
only way.
So Vista
Which
Lake
way
is
is
the only way in.
At the moment, East Vista to Northeast Seventh in toward the water tower
Correct.
would be the only way. The road to the north doesn't exist for,
When I say two access points.
okay,
When, if this road goes all the way through, which is what we're talking about for, what, 2 million?
Yes, yep.
So you, this road essentially connects Madison and
okay, I get what you're saying.
So you would just do like half of the project.
well,
Okay,
the money's, the water, the money
Yep.
it already is, because I know that doing half of this probably doesn't cost half as much as what this is, so there's a real question that we need to answer.
okay.
We only need to get there one way, if it is just a soccer practice field or two with limited, you know, parking.
Okay.
Until we hit the time where we need to.
That is still up in the air. We have no idea.
We do have a date. Do you want me to look? Would that be helpful?
Sorry, I missed the.
Give me a second here. I'm gonna unplug so I can,
From Madison,
By a certain
north
date.
to this lake.
Oh, right there.
What is that date?
Got it.
Well, the other thing about that road too, when it is constructed, is not only will it have sidewalk, but it will have parking along it as well. Correct? You'll be able to park along that?
Along
Will it be
Northeast
wide
Seventh.
enough? East Seventh, Northeast Seventh?
Yeah, throughway.
Won't be wide enough.
you could probably have parking on one side of the road like we do our other streets. Yeah.
But all concepts to date, Mayor, do not show parking on Northeast Seventh, but yeah, yes, you could alter that.
So I want to back up real quick. I do believe you could use TIF for the project. We would have to amend our urban renewal plan and we would still have to get the sign off on that. So I don't want to guarantee it. That's why I've put the levy amount increase as an impact also. Yes, like we would need to do that. We could declare it an urban renewal project and we could use some TIF funding to reduce the impact to the taxes. So, yeah, and just clarification, I know that I plugged $2 million in, but the estimate from Snyder is 1.6, and that does include some contingency. So it could come in, lower than $2 million when you bid it out. I don't have a crystal ball for that, but I can tell you it's the city's obligation to construct that road under the current agreement, and you all know things just get expensive year after year, more expensive year after year.
Just one last thing, just trying to be transparent, I mean, where I'm conflicted is, we just had 48% of the people said they don't want to increase the budget. We're gonna increase this for the next 20 years, I doubt it's gonna go down, right? We're gonna have to add more stuff onto it, so it's just.
And I think that's the value of the committee. Give us 6 months. We've already had really good discussion the very first meeting. Ranged from, discussion. Different ways to fund it, including would the committee recommend going back for another bond referendum? So everything has been on the table.
for the purpose of the budget, what do you all want me to put in the budget? Do you want me to leave it as is? Do you want me to change it? This is for the purpose of the budget.
And so as is, you don't have any extra.
Yes, I don't know if we do have phase three. We'll have to double check on that, but it would be our intention to put that in. If you are giving us the yes, please proceed that way.
Doesn't change the
Okay.
line,
No.
because we already have funds.
Yep.
So the yes would include the 2 million and the 900,000?
No 900.
Just the 2 million.
Yep, that is what we have today, yes. I haven't heard from Jeff. Do you have any feedback? Okay, so would you all like to, I do have this as a further topic of discussion at Monday's work session. Can I leave that on the agenda? I understand you've given me the yes, but thought we better get into some of the details, and I've asked Travis to prepare something on that. Is that okay? Okay, okay. I'm sorry, Nick, I'm still looking for when our deadline is. That is a great idea.
Sure. It'd be good to know that date for council to know that.
It would be. Yeah, we can take a quick break and I'll look. I'll see if I can find it.
Right? Do we have to gavel out?
No.
let's go ahead and resume.
Okay, and just, let me get plugged back in here. It's not- Okay. Was it? Ah, dang it. Of course it did. There we go. Okay. Okay, let's pick back up real quick. We can get into further details later at future discussions, but my understanding is the council says leave the $2 million in the budget for the road. We have no deadline to construct Northeast Seventh. NAP's deadline to construct their portion of Northeast Seventh and Madison is June 30, 2026. So it might align really well with when they're constructing, and we will certainly try to work with them if that's something that we end up doing on their timeline and our timeline.
So you said we have no obligation to that, to do our streets at all.
We have an obligation, there's no deadline. And I think we wrote that in there because we said, you know, we have to have voter approval for the park. So I think that is why we put no actual timeline for Northeast Seventh in our portion of the agreement. I'm going to hold off on the general corporate purpose, the 900,000. We will get through our park committee meetings. If you all decide that you want to do a budget amendment next year for that component, we can handle it that way. Does that sound good? Okay, so road and trail are in the budget for next year. We will spend additional time talking about what those projects look like. Okay, great discussion and really good feedback. Okay. I want to spend a little time talking about this section of trail. Do you all see the map on East Vista Lake Ave where there's a gap in trail? So that you all know, we have agreements with 115 East Vista and 225 East Vista for them to pay for a portion of that trail. 115 East Vista, the agreement is not to exceed $8,000. Our total estimated cost for the frontage across 115 East Vista is $23,745. It's a pretty significant property. It's a pretty big frontage on their property. 224 East Vista, oh, I'm sorry, I have two different, I think it is 225. 225 East Vista is responsible for 50% of the cost for a multi-use trail. We've estimated that frontage would cost about $16,250. So we would be responsible for 50% of the cost there, and the daycare would be responsible for 50% of the cost. I have not engaged with either property owner on this. This is what I'm looking for, some feedback. We've put this in the budget. We would recommend that this would be something that you could amend your urban renewal plan for, and we could use TIF on this project. We've budgeted $50,000 because the property owners may ask to repay back their portion through special assessment. Generally, special assessments increase the cost of projects because you have to have attorneys involved to draft the paperwork. So we have budgeted high on this project, but I do have this in next year's budget. That 115 East Vista agreement has been in place for quite some time. That is DYOWA. I think they're like a robotics company. It used to be Bruce Boland's building. There is no trail or sidewalk connectivity up there if you're coming from 3rd Street. So, you know, there is an elementary school. I think that's somewhat driving the need to make this connection, but I have put it in next year's budget. Okay, we need to amend our urban renewal plan before we get started on this, which we would do everything we could. We will find out about the park as well. And yeah, this one is one of those things. Okay, any questions? Okay,
So just something I'm interested in knowing, and the fact that we're looking at finishing this sidewalk makes me wonder about it more. So people would be crossing across the roundabout to go down Third Street. So we don't currently have any lights or anything up there designating where that crosswalk is, because the sidewalk's not finished.
do we have a,
Do we have a light there?
I think we have a rapid flashing beacon on East Vista. I don't know about Third, north of the roundabout.
I thought it was all set up.
That it was set up, or that?
Like the
isn't
lights
that
are in
funny that none
place.
of us know?
The sidewalks don't go anywhere, but at the crossings, I believe there's the ability to hit the button.
I do believe there's one on the east side. I don't know about the north side, but we could look into that and make sure there is one.
Have the trail just south of the picture, right? Property that I think more people would utilize, pull down out if you're going to.
We are currently in the DOT bid letting for June 2025. We may push that back to the fall, just depending on a couple of different things. Construction would probably happen either late 25 or early 26.
In the refunding process, added listed on bid.
It would have to be a separate bid because that is federally funded. So it has, this wouldn't go through DOT, this would just be, this could actually be something that we could just get competitive quotes on and probably wouldn't have to do public bid because it would be under that dollar amount. If the property owners want to go special assessment, I don't know what that looks like. That adds time onto your schedule too. So there are some unknowns here. The tough thing about 115 East Vista, they graded to put the trail in. We agreed that they'd be responsible for 8,000. When that agreement was entered into, 8,000 was probably 50% of the cost, but now that, 10 years has gone by, we're getting more lopsided on the city being more responsible instead of the property owner. So I think the longer you prolong doing that, the more expensive it becomes for the city and the full tax base. That's one of the reasons or rationale I put it in. The daycare one is a little bit easier because it's 50-50. So if you put that off for, a number of years, you're still gonna get 50% of your cost recovered. And then, just so you all know, with the recently approved mini storage, the Titan mini storage project, they'll be responsible for trail to that crosswalk and then sidewalk all the way to Northeast Fifth Street. They will have to put trail and then sidewalk on the frontage of both of those streets there. Okay. I want to talk about this. So we've budgeted to change and purchase new accounting software for next year. So that you all know, we do everything in our accounting software. Utility billing, all of the budget stuff is done in the software, the bank reconciliation. We've used a company, it used to be called Data Technologies. They're now G-Works. They were bought out by G-Works, which used to be just a GIS company. We've used them for 20 years in Polk City. Throughout my career, I've always had just really positive experiences with Data Tech. They've just made some pretty significant changes over the past few years, and they've not gone well for other municipalities. So there is going to be a pretty significant change with G-Works this year. They're going to move us to the cloud. A couple of things, we are not hearing good reviews from other cities, and the last few changes they've implemented have been pretty difficult on both the city staff and the residents. So change is coming if we stay with G-Works. We thought this was an opportunity to shop around, especially if we were expecting disruption. We put together some figures for you after shopping around. Excuse me. There's not a lot of companies that provide municipal software to cities. It's pretty limited. So we've got 3 proposals for you. Our recommendation is to move to Civic Systems. It is a large one-time expense, but it would be a good future return on investment. It would also provide for better efficiencies with the staff. I'm gonna have to stop and get some water. Can we just take a quick break? Okay. Do we have water in the fridge? All right, sorry about that.
Make sure, yeah. Our construction observer said that there is.
Do we get a good answer?
Yes,
Okay.
there are.
All right, excuse me, sorry. So we've been shopping around. As you can see, yes, there is a large one-time expense for the new software system, but it would be a good return on investment after a few years. Do you all recall when we transitioned to front desk for utility billing many years ago? They're doing away with front desk. There's going to be a new interface with G-Works. So there is going to be a lot of change even on the resident side of the software. We're trying to get kind of a handle on this, but our recommendation is there's going to be change and disruption with the software. We'd like to just change to a different system. Okay? Questions? Oh, the last thing I want to add, just one thing that we really like about this new software, and this has been a staff decision of all of the people that use the software. This is not just coming from one person. I think we're all on board with this decision. They have this option for service orders, which is something we can't do in our current system. So anytime we need a meter read or somebody needs their meter changed out, we can actually create a work order for the Public Works Department and track if it's been done or not. So just a couple of cool items that new software would provide. I did mention it'll be more efficient for the staff too. Right now, if you're doing bank reconciliation or utility billing, everybody in the office has to get out of the program so you can do one of those items. It's just not a super efficient system. I'm telling you that it's in the proposed budget. It is a large one-time expense. We would pay for this out of the general fund, water and sewer.
A 10-year lifespan.
I think we're hopeful, but we have been with G-Works for 20 years. That's a pretty long time. But yes, I would not recommend making a change that wouldn't be longer than 20 years or so. just because of that one-time implementation fee. Okay, let's talk about new equipment for next year. Next year, we have a few pieces of equipment in the proposed budget. The first thing is we do have a police vehicle in the budget for $89,000. This would be funded with local option sales tax. We have a fire engine that we ordered 3 years ago, Chief, 2.5? 2.5, we've just been waiting for it. That engine is $700,000. We have put a down payment on that engine of $175,000. So we will have the remaining balance due next fiscal year. And that would be funded with local option sales tax as well. There is a public works dump truck replacement. This would be for $227,000. We also will need to install a new outdoor warning siren at Antler Ridge. We have the siren. The cost that you saw with civil defense was specific to hooking up the siren. Those are electrical costs. And they're very expensive, but we have that in the budget for $25,000. One item that is in the CIP that is not in next year's budget is a Public Works pickup truck for $65,000. The reason it's not in the budget is because the water fund is negative next year, as you all saw earlier, and our road use fund has no additional funds available. We haven't figured out when we would replace that pickup truck, but it did not make it into the budget. I did ask Mike if we had a priority between the dump truck and the pickup truck, and we thought that there was a lot more costs involved with the dump truck, right, Mike? Yes. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on this? Correct. Correct. I am going to let Chief talk about the K-9 program.
Thanks. I just want to give everybody an update on our K-9 program and some history on it too, if you guys weren't on council when we first developed it. Polk City's first ever K-9 program was established in 2017. It was the same year I came over here from Windsor Heights. The program was established primarily by funding from donations and a grant we got from Prairie Meadows. In August of 2018, Officer Eicher was selected to be the K-9 handler. There's a process for that selection. And then after, choosing the K-9, we went with Eudorus, which is a Belgian Malinois out of Sheraton with the trainer down there. Eudorus is a dual-purpose K-9 capable of tracking, article searching, and drug detection. During the program, Officer Eicher and Eudorus have made more than 130 deployments over the course of those years. Within those deployments, they've had seizures of over 310 grams of meth, over 310 grams of marijuana, 12 grams of heroin, and more than 250 pieces of paraphernalia. Granted, these weren't all just in Polk City, but around the Des Moines metro as well. Due to the age of Eudorus and the medical and working history of the rest of the litter that he came from, I do plan to retire him in June of 2025 while he's still healthy. Officer Eicher does plan to keep possession of Eudorus after the retirement, and we'll put some kind of purchase agreement in place at a later date. We do plan to have some sort of retirement celebration when that date gets closer, probably early this summer, open to the public. Does anybody have any questions? I'm not removing the program altogether, but we won't immediately go into another K-9 unit. Kind of sit back, assess this past one, look at the costs involved and that sort of thing. Anything else?
Cost us with all the training that they've been to together?
I don't have a total number. I believe the dog itself was about $25,000. And then we do monthly trainings and have been ever since the program started. The initial certifications, I believe he went down there for about 2 weeks to do the initial between the dog and Officer Iker to get certified. And then the vehicle maintenance, we do have a specific vehicle for the K-9 program. I plan on putting that to Gov Deals to sell it to go towards our new vehicle for this coming fiscal year. But overall, I don't have a total cost with all the training time and everything like that.
A good chunk of the upfront cost, if not all of it, was raised outside of the city maybe presents some, but
Yes.
most of it was raised through.
Yeah, the community, honestly, the community paid for the majority of it. I think if I remember correctly, the Prairie Meadows grant, we requested I think it was like $60,000, and that would include a vehicle and everything, like full cost, to start up the program. I think we got 10,000 out of them, so it didn't even cover what the dog itself, was valued at. But the city has been putting in, from the beginning, $5,000 a year into the budget to help manage it. We've continued throughout the years also to get a lot of donations from the public, specific for the K-9 program, and that includes, our association essentially pays for all its food, medical bills, and that sort of thing. So,
Ask why you're not.
a lot of it really is just to kind of take a look at some other opportunities our department could look into. The level of interest, you have to have the right officer that actually wants to do it. And really just kind of take a look at more or less stabilizing Officer Iker back into a regular patrol position. And just, I'm looking at some other opportunities to offer to my staff, specialized positions, that sort of thing. In the future, I mean, if there's a strong interest and a need for it, I definitely consider bringing it back again. It's not off the table, but just immediately, I don't want to jump right back into another one. The vehicle it's shot, we'd have to start from scratch again, so. We're hoping it gets us to June, to be honest with you. We bought it used to get us by after the other one was involved in a crash, so I think it'll get us by, but if we have another big repair coming, we'll probably have another conversation before June comes along. Well, the thing too is, he's a good working dog. He's still showing the interest. A lot of times that's kind of what the first thing you want to look at is if they start disconnecting, losing interest, that's usually time to call it quits. From this litter, I was told that Eudorus is the only dog left still working. The others have more or less medicaled out or lost interest. And with Officer Iker wanting to take the dog afterwards, we don't want to leave him with a unhealthy dog that their family's gonna have to pay a lot of money for to keep for hopefully a few more years. I think he's approximately 8 years old in total. Forfeiture. With the program too, it was set up requesting that the handler do a 5-year commitment. So he's already surpassed that as well. So we've definitely got a lot of good use out of this dog in the program.
Thanks for the update. It has been a good program, but I think it's very appropriate to revisit it. And
Yep.
look forward to more.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we've got only a handful of slides left. Okay. So city staff, proposed wage increase for city staff next year is up to 3%. I always like to give just a caveat, everybody gets an increase based off of a merit and performance evaluation. So this is what we build into the budget. So most staff members are eligible for up to 3% next year. Monday, the council will review and consider the final report of the compensation study. This is what I have proposed and this is what I am recommending. The overall goal is to have people in a position to the midpoint at 5 years. So positions that are below the midpoint are eligible for a higher adjustment than 3%. If an employee's been in a position for 5 years, we've worked it into the budget to take them to the midpoint July 1st. Again, those increases will also be merit-based. If an employee has been in the position less than 5 years, we've prepared a plan that adjusts employees to the midpoint by year 5 of their employment. So the total cost to adjust those specific to the comp study is $21,476. It's a pretty minimal adjustment, honestly. Questions? You will all review the final report. It's out in the council packet for Monday evening. So new city staff. We have 2 new positions in next year's budget, and we spent a lot of time at the beginning of the session talking about how, we're only getting 2.5% new property tax revenue. So we've had to do this a little differently this year. The parks coordinator, the full-time, is budgeted, but to start September 1st, 2025, instead of July 1st. That saves us a little bit of money with a 2-month break, them not starting until September 1st.
Onboarding somebody July 1 would be difficult, given we're in the middle of a storm at that point. So, no, I've survived the last 4 summers with seasonal staff. I can get through 1 more. And, that'll make sure I'm selecting the right candidate. That too gives them the opportunity to onboard when it's not throwing them to the wolves right away.
Okay. The other position is another full-time police officer. We've only budgeted for this position for 3 months. There's a couple of things. We have an officer that will be deployed on military leave in April of 25. He will be deployed for a year. So effective April, we are going to be down to 8 officers. So we would be adding that position. July 1st, we would hire someone, but then we would budget for that 10th officer 3 months of next year only. So we have it in the budget for 9 officers for 9 months and 1 officer for 3 months. Sorry, I included chief as an officer. So this aligns with the city staffing plan. We're not proposing an increase to the city's tax levy rate. If you go back to the city staffing plan, there were some levy implications with that plan. We're able to make it work and not adjust the levy rate with this proposal. So it is adding 2 positions, but it is not having those 2 positions for the full 12 months of the year. Any questions, concerns?
So I did ask Chief to explain this a little bit to me, how this deployment works. And I think it's probably good for the council to hear too. You can explain it.
Okay.
If you want to, about the salary implications and us needing to guarantee a position for that person when they come back.
Yeah, you can come up.
Okay. So with Kevin leaving, while he's gone, we won't be paying his actual salary or benefits. But I guess so he'll be gone for about a year, and that's where we came up with the 3 months, right? Where we're only gonna be paying for that extra officer or the 10th officer. What else did you mention to touch on?
Are required to offer him a position.
Oh, yes, yep. So with deployments over a year, when they do return, they're guaranteed their position back. I think they have to reapply technically, and they have to do that within 90 days of their return if they want that position. So right now with conversations with Kevin, I'm hoping he'll come back right away when he gets back from his deployment. But there is a possibility it could go on as much as 3 more months beyond that before we get him back. I think with my conversations with him, he'll be ready to come back. But it's really open-ended. We don't have any direct orders yet from the military. They don't give us a lot of heads up on anything really. He kind of gave us a possible date of actually leaving for deployment between the 23rd of May and the 30th. And he had put in some time off prior to that, where he'll leave us in April to get his affairs in order before he's gone.
Is there any way to tell if it will be extended?
No, I honestly don't even know if he knows where he's going for sure yet. I think a lot of things in the world changed recently that affected the initial plan. I think it was initially going to be Israel. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case anymore. And then he said typically 12 to 13 months being gone. So
hiring a new person to basically cover his vacancy.
it'll keep us status quo until, correct, then we'll have that second, I'll push it into a daytime position essentially to help with coverage there. So it'll be over a year from now where we actually see the benefits of the additional staff.
Okay. Bravo Catch Des Moines, I want to spend just a little time talking about this. And so you all know, we have a 28E agreement with Bravo and Catch Des Moines that we fund them or help fund them through our hotel motel tax, and it's divided accordingly. So Bravo gets 2/7 of the tax. Catch Des Moines gets 2/7, and then the city of Polk City gets to keep 3/7. So it's a 7-cent tax, and 2 cents goes to Bravo, 2 cents goes to Catch Des Moines, 3 cents stays with the city of Polk City. Fiscal year numbers, I broke out the allocation for you. Sometimes it is higher than this. It all depends on how our hotel in town is doing. But last year, fiscal year '24, we gave Bravo $7,200, $7,200 to Catch Des Moines, and the city kept a little over 10,000 of our hotel motel tax. So the 28E agreement requires an 18-month termination clause. Some of you have asked me this, so I'm giving you the information. It has to be given by December 31st, and then the 18 months is effective after that. Several cities are proposing, instead of opting out of Bravo and Catch Des Moines, that they change the allocation of how they collect hotel motel tax. I just have some really basic information on this today. They were actually meeting this afternoon and it conflicted with our work session. But several cities right now are proposing to change the agreement. That instead of it being the 2 cents, that it would be Bravo gets 25% of hotel motel tax and Catch Des Moines gets 25% of hotel motel tax. So I just gave you an example of how that would change our payments to those two entities. It would lower it about $900 a year if we continued to get, you know, our, what is that, roughly $25,000. So is the city council interested in engaging in those conversations, talking about reallocating or changing the 28E agreement?
Talk a little bit about them.
Yeah, sure, yep.
As we hear people had that reactions and they were going ahead and yeah, I do think that these are organizations as communities are, I mean, figure out how to cut their budgets because of some of these bigger impacts. I know. I do think it's a good organization. I do think that, like I said, with the Historical Society, not direct funds yet, you know, in that way. I mean, they have some funds, but good conversation, good resources, opportunity for funds. Groups are trying to help their budget situation. And importance of dropping from Bravo. How anybody else feels, but I do think that there is Bravo and Catch.
one of the things that I would just say about Bravo is we've had this discussion before, and then we had a presentation from Bravo and also from our supervisor on the importance of that was before we had our own arts and culture committee. For you, that committee has no money. Throw that in there because we now have an arts and culture. That's what I say about Bravo. So I was at Catch Des Moines yesterday, meeting, and I've given Catch Des Moines some thought, and I was thinking of how Catch Des Moines either helps us now or has the potential to help us down the road. And I think really with Catch Des Moines, there's more potential to help us down the road. And what I mean by that is I've already talked to their marketing people about providing us a communications plan that we could follow when it comes time to implement publicity for our Polk City Junction Trail. And they have agreed to help us with that. And also to help us with advertising our Polk City Junction Trail. They have a magazine that they do. They also do a lot of promoting of things online, and I think those are things. So I do see some benefit to being connected with that organization. I do know that that's $1,000 that
Back to the Arts and Cultures Committee though, too, I do think there's opportunity to understand. Not the only community that's trying to do art things, so not only grant potential, but to still leverage that expertise and
I think both organizations, different conversations. My big thing, it would be great for them to help with what you talked about here. Always been in the firmest footing, so anything putting them over the edge would be concerning. I don't know if they people to the hotel, or if there's no way you can tell whether or not that happens. They always been Bravo is a little bit funnier. I think now that we do have arts and culture, $1,000 to jump a lot of the are the an appropriate use. When I let people know that that's where that hotel tax goes, opportunity cost that we're not hotel tax rise a little bit.
If you want to opt out of Bravo or Catch Des Moines, you have to give notice December 31st this year. That wouldn't be effective until July 1, 2027. So that's a long time. Are you interested in, again, engaging in the reallocation formula for now? But if you want to make a decision by the end of the year, you could also make that decision.
So do we have the option to change the formula? That's our ability?
It's a 28E agreement. All of the other communities have to agree to it. So,
again, I would imagine that some communities are having to take a hard look at their budgets as the money goes. They're trying to find something that they keep a little more of it.
yes.
Still support
Well,
directors yesterday to approve boardwalks participation. People coming, coming on board. Now, they are going to have 3 hotels, I think. Maybe my number is wrong.
They're joining because they're building 3 hotels? Or they're after, and the hotels are already there?
Well, I guess I don't know.
Ask is, if they're already there, that may be in what Catch Point does for funneling people to hotels. Yeah, the baseline of what now they're joining.
Still based on discussions that there is a tremendous need for space in the metro area for a lot of the big events that they're bringing online. So, to answer the question, do they funnel people to Polk City's one and only hotel? I suppose they would say they do their best. I've never specifically asked that question.
So, and I know Norwalk has built a huge sports complex, so it makes sense that they would join if people are utilizing that as satellite location for tournaments.
That 2 asks for this. Right? Or maybe just the 28.
I would encourage you to, let's find out what the other cities are doing and proposing. Like I said, I missed a meeting this afternoon. This was the proposal yesterday. I'll bring it back to you, but just know that if you want to opt out of that agreement, you have to make that decision by the end of the year. You don't have to make that decision today. Okay? Dart?
Okay, if we do want to get Bravo to come out and talk to your culture committee, I think, again. And yeah, evaluate it over the course of this year. Value of the expertise that they have.
I have 3 other things to chat with you about that I don't have a slide for. So let's get through these quickly. Things that did not make the budget next year. A new electronic sign at the town square. The LED screen is broken inside the sign. The company has discontinued monochromatic signs and cannot get any parts to replace and repair the existing sign. A new sign will cost $25,000. I want to give a point of clarification here. Some of you reached out to me a couple of weeks ago looking for information. This is the information I gathered through Mike Schulte, because he knows the history. So, have you all been to the sign? There's a planter box and then there's a sign that sits on top of it. The planter box was donated to the city in 1983. On the top of the planter box used to be a manual sign. Mayor called it a church sign. That is what I envision. But the city employees used to have to manually insert messaging into the sign. The planter box and the manual sign were the donation to the city, okay? In 2005, 2006, the city council decided to purchase an electronic sign to replace the manual sign. In 2016, that sign broke. The city council decided to purchase a second electronic sign for $11,000. They had several options and chose the cheapest option, which was the monochromatic electronic sign. To date, we've spent $1,600 in repair for the second sign that was purchased in 2016. Both electronic signs were purchased using tax dollars and were not donations. So the manual sign was the donation. The 2 electronic signs were paid for by the city. I did not incorporate this into the budget. We did get quotes for a new sign. It would be $25,000 to replace that sign. I know the sign is not working. It's not been working for a number of months. We can talk about replacing the sign, or we can talk about removing the sign, but I gave you the price tag for a new sign.
Well, we'd have to take that money out of reserve, correct? The 25.
Yes, more than likely. Yep, if it's a priority to the council, we can continue to monitor the budget through the remaining budget year and see if we have anything remaining. But more than likely, you're talking about reserve funds. No, we do not, but we can get that.
Well, there is the Polk City sign on top, so technically you could take out this sign that's in the middle and drop down the Polk City sign on top of the planter box. I mean, we'd have to kind of rig it because right now they plant in front of the sign, low profile things, but maybe there would be a way that we could create stakes or something so you could still plant underneath the sign as I'm looking at these two over here. But we would have the actual Polk City logo piece, we could find a way to reuse. It's separate from the actual digital part.
Thank you for that input, Jenny. I see that one over really well.
This,
It'll be okay, I'll help.
I think I'm kind of was going similar to where Nick, you were asking, so I think you know that email. First thing is, I'd like to find out if my hypothesis is true. We're past the point where more people get information. All types to weigh in on that, make sure that that's true. That is true. So if it's not as prominent of an informational piece as it was, lean into the editorial piece to it, or kind of revert to some older version, put something that is non-electronic and therefore not going to cost any money going forward, but that looks good, and then, well, and do that. There's a culture, but it's probably, for society to say, what did it look like when it first went in? Is there a version of this with a manual sign? Merry Christmas or whatever, I don't know. So it's off, and again, if we could work on it, offloading that to another organization and making it positive, visual. I don't think I was on when it was changed.
And I will also say, I'm not gonna say as eloquently as Travis would, but as traffic engineers have pointed out, changes to that intersection, having signage at intersections becomes a danger. I know businesses.
I was just like, why are people taking their eyes off the road while kids are getting ice cream? Like, I hadn't thought about it till this came up, and I'm like, why do we even have that? That's a bad idea. So again, not to discredit what was, but you know, as times change, I'm like, it's such a busy intersection, and kids are ready to get ice cream and information. So if digital signage is important, I would support looking for other options.
okay. 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 Do you two have any thoughts or suggestions? Okay. Mayor?
The only comment that I would make is the digital sign is very, digital sign is very easy to change. When you start talking about manually changing a sign, if that's where we're going with this.
Well, I brought that up as a possibility for someone like the historical. If we wanted to go with old school, hosting our meetings and they want to once a month put Merry Christmas and whatever, I don't know, but that's what we would talk to them, not for,
And this might be further conversation.
But we could look for some other options that are low cost, maybe low maintenance. Okay.
Had the whole sign ordinance discussion and other groups have signs, like, have it rentable, or, where you can put, not like manually change each letter, have it so that it would support, like, banners that these groups could, the groups, so whoever was doing Four Seasons, whoever was having a pancake breakfast, again, I'm open to whatever options we want to explore on this, but, yeah, not. Well, no, but again, not that you stop the read. I know, like I said, number one preference, no sign, but open to ideas.
So, not to belabor it, but since the sign doesn't work, can we look at removing it?
Yes, we will do that. We needed to have this discussion first, so yes, we will. Just the sign.
So that people aren't constantly reminded that the sign isn't working.
Yep. Jason has asked me when we are doing the town square master plan. I want to say that's in fiscal year 27. That could be something that is incorporated in that planning process too.
I'm sure going through that process would show different opportunities for that corner as well, especially as that corner continues to evolve with maybe a traffic signal or something. So it might, I agree with not investing in that corner until that plan is done, to see what it could be.
I think it's in 27, so it would be the budget we work on next year.
But until then, we can still get rid of that middle piece.
well, and let's talk to both arts and culture and society. They don't want anything to do with it.
So I appreciate that, but I as a group. One that's not functioning. What we're gonna do. So I understand, I
So you want an
respect.
empty thing for,
We can put plants in it, yeah, or flowers.
Just we remove everything above the plan, the frame, the sign.
Like I said, I appreciate your.
I'm not in a rush to put any visuals.
Okay,
And make it as pretty as we can with limited.
So we have a couple of different things on the table. Is that the consensus from council members to take it down or look at other options? You're take it down, right?
My vote is to take the sign down and not, we know that we're not gonna do any expense.
Haven't heard from you, Jeff.
okay. Okay. That sounds good. Let's also talk about the playground equipment at the town square. I need to put this on your radar. The next thing needs to be put on your radar too. The town square playground equipment is slated to be replaced in the fiscal year 2030 CIP. So that's 5 years from now. 5 years from now, we'll work on that budget. So you all know we have equipment that is broken and we cannot find parts to repair it. We are talking about removing it and maybe replacing it with something else, but it's gonna be costly because of the safety surfacing. The point I'm trying to drive home is I don't know that that playground equipment can wait 5 years to be replaced. So that may be something we come to you in the very near future to be discussing. It's not in next year's budget, but needs to be on your radar. 300,000.
That's forever. We just have one piece that's not working.
Correct.
That we can't fix. To put something else in that place would require. Yeah, I think it's a worthy conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we gotta do something with that piece that's not working.
We're not going to. We're probably going to need to talk about this in the next month or two, but I wanted you all to kind of just be aware of that. So we are trying to come to a resolution. We know it's the most used playground equipment in the entire city, so it's a priority. Yeah. Okay. The last thing, Big Creek Commons was required to do a traffic impact study as part of their plat. Their TIS came back and is recommending a left turn lane be added on North Side Drive. The counts involved in the traffic impact study accounted for the park as well. So the recommendation is that 50% of the traffic involved coming off of North Side Drive would be attributed to the park and 50% could be attributed to the subdivision. We've not, we just got this number. This is not something we've had conversations with the developer on, but it does sound like we could be responsible for some cost sharing of that turn lane. The estimated cost for the turn lane is $386,000.
If this is on the north side, but is this that road that we're talking about more than 7th? Where's the turning?
North 7th, Northeast 7th Street, yes. So this is pretty fresh. This is something we'll need to further discuss in the next few months, but this is one thing that is kind of holding up KNAPP's construction drawings from being submitted, is there's some off-site improvements they're gonna be responsible for, and we will as well. But we've negotiated some of these things in development agreements previously, so I think that we can come to some sort of resolution. With that said, that's all I have today. Thanks everybody for your hard work. I appreciate you all being here on a Friday afternoon and prioritizing this. Special thanks to the staff that has been working on the budget for the last couple of months, so thank you.
Yes, thank you. I know this is not an easy job for you guys to get it to this point. I mean, we have a lot of discussion today, but I know there's a lot of work and hard decisions that get to this point, so.
And second. All in favor, say aye.